not to be called out, but just to be made aware.
That my disclaimer is that we're all highly sensitive.
Rolling
Uh,
around, playing, playful.
are they even bears?
Or is that what is it? Scaly?
No,
What is
that's
it?
no, that's
Scaling.
there you go. As well, it's Gabor.
Hmm.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy New Year's Eve to you both.
Happy New
We
Year's Eve.
have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of them are the same.
Okay.
All right. Ooh, I like that background, Terry.
You do? What's it look like from your
It's
perspective?
fine.
I'm standing on.
Well, that's
It
kind of
looks like
weird.
a headpiece on your right side.
Yeah.
It looks like half of a Star Wars. She's got this thing.
All right. Okay. So should we get
Okay,
started?
here we go. Yeah, yeah.
And then
Greetings, everyone. It is December 31st. Terry Kim and Kristen Lindstrom. I'm so honored and grateful to be sharing this time with you guys on the eve of a new year to continue in our journey and exploration of the Enneagram that we started last time, and we featured Kristen in the love seat.
Oh,
Um,
that's the
and just exploring Enneagram, the kind of a personality analysis, so to speak. It's really eye-opening and frighteningly accurate. And it's a great guide in helping us to look at ourselves and look at our relationships, both professionally and personally. And this is part of, Terry, you were bringing up the goals for analysis and exploration and conversation. In this case, for us, how we use the Enneagram in our relationships professionally with our clients, our patients, our colleagues, and also bring it in our personal relationships as well as within ourselves too, I find.
right.
That's like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just
Terry,
realized. Let's do the reading. Did either of you have a book in mind?
go
Okay.
ahead, Terry. Yeah.
Ready?
So somebody call out when to stop and somebody say right or left, okay? Okay, ready? Okay, I'm flipping now.
Stop.
Okay, right or left? Okay,
Right.
right. I know it's important when I open up to this page because it's colored and it's got writing all over it on the sides and the margins.
Meant to be.
Meant to be, I guess.
Can we see?
Yeah, so this is, well, it's Gabor.
Hmm.
And it's hard to see the coloring in
Mm-hmm.
doing, but then you get all my writing in the beneath all the posturing, punditry, and politicking, the pulse of unseen emotional undercurrents thumps insistently. I can't prove it, of course, but social psychology doesn't lend itself to the kind of firm conclusions achievable in the physical sciences. What I can do is point to it, offering my observations and citing examples and research where possible, and trust people to look for themselves. I do consider this issue of enormous importance, and not just because trauma adds flammable emotional fuel to already fiery family dinner table debates. For one thing, political culture is among the many avenues by which toxic myths become normalized truths.
Mm.
Politics are intimately linked with the social character, as we have discussed, the set of desired characteristics that most dispose people to function smoothly within a given system, even if those traits are literally sickening to us. The same holds for those who steer the ship. A society like ours demands of its leaders a certain set of dispositions and worldviews, call it political character, without which their careers would never get off the ground given the job requirements. The traits most amenable to stewarding a socioeconomic system that traumatizes populations as a matter of course will, naturally, be ones that inure their bearer to vital aspects of emotional life, if not disable the compassion circuitry outright. This always starts with the self early in life. There may be exceptions, but I haven't seen many, especially not at the uppermost echelons of power. When trauma manifests on the political stage, the consequences for people and the planet are massive. Politicians make policy, after all, and policy creates or cements the very culture and cultural conditions we know are anti-ethical to our health. The level of trauma awareness or blindness they and we bring to the political conversations can't help playing itself out in the world we end up living in. If disease is the individual body's way of alerting us to something out of joint, something contrary to what our nature intends for us, then surely social maladies like addiction and global catastrophes like climate change are all signs of something amiss in the body politic.
Okay.
All right, so let's go on to Ed Sue. All right, Ed's on the love seat. Hop on.
All right.
So Ed's top three
Okay.
in the Enneagram is type 2, the helper, type 9, the peacemaker, and type 6, the loyalist. And Kristen, let me ask you a question
Yeah.
about Ed.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, if you were just to sum him up in a sentence or two, how would you characterize Ed Sue?
Mm, I would say thoughtful, caring, and someone who goes out of his way to help others.
Thoughtful, caring, and
Mm.
someone who goes out of his way to help others.
Yeah, generous.
Generous. And
Mhm.
so when you have seen him on a day-to-day basis in the clinic, how does that show up in his patient care?
Always giving 150%.
150%, not
150. That's like way over.
okay.
It's showing up in what I always noticed was just like the beauty in the relationships that he formed and how much his patients valued their time with him and what he was giving them. Highly regarded by staff and patients, you know, getting excessive, getting wonderful feedback. Patients always wanting to, if they were coming back for a second episode, always wanting to continue with him. Yeah, I think he really kind of forms that bond with people that where people feel respected and heard. Like the patients were kind of the center of his universe, and that he was kind of giving everything he had to them to help them on their path. It was beautiful to watch just those interactions and how fulfilled people felt after being in his presence.
I would agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
He has an infectious quality to him. He's
Mm-hmm.
he's always warm, and he doesn't. Ed, I'm speaking to you. Sorry, Ed. It's like he's not in the room.
Yeah.
He's right in front of me. Speaking to you, Ed, is he's connected,
Mm,
and he focuses once he has the patient in his physical space that there is a clarity of like I'm focusing on you, and let's see what we can do. And I don't think I've ever seen you distracted in patient care. Not really. Something else is going on, and it might be something that you're dealing with, but you seem to be able to compartmentalize it at some level, and you can focus on what you need to do, which is to pour love into the care with your patients and whatnot. Okay, so the second question is for you,
yeah.
Kristen, is what do you think out of this experiencing with Ed are some of the things that you in yourself you feel like, wow, I see what he's doing, but maybe this is not helpful for him?
I think what I noticed is, again, always that willingness to give and prioritizing the giving to others. And then that would, well, time wise, that would be kind of at the expense, being able to kind of fulfill the other responsibilities, that doing his notes and having to stay late or hours after the patient care was wrapped up too. And then energetically, although he never didn't often lead on to the fact that he was drained, it was just something where, again, he was just constantly giving all that he had to others. Well, and then, sometimes it would show up in maybe not having the energy to give to his relationship, the time, because he, spent so much physical time, in the office.
I would
Yeah.
agree with you on that as well. And I know Ed knows that because I would get on Ed as his
Mm-hmm.
superior.
Mm-hmm.
And, I couldn't be too hard on Ed because
I know you can't, because
you
you
just,
love him, and
exactly, you
and
just
he's.
can't when to say something.
Oh, I was just another example. I remember when we were kind of short on acupuncturists, and he was willing to fill in and, take on extra hours. And he was, trying to do that as well as, live it be in between two places. And he was just always, well, I can do it. I can do it. Yeah, I can do full days. I can do, and finally I just had to say, you're not going to work. You need a day of rest, or you need a day to go, spend with Matt, and spend time on that aspect of your life. And again, as Terry, you said to me early on in my career, the patients will be here when you get back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
take that time for yourself. So, but yeah, sometimes that was a struggle, and you were always willing to go above and beyond, um, to help others,
Mm.
give them your time and your energy.
And that is our predilection,
Mm-hmm.
to be in the practice and to love the practice that we do, actually. I mean, I believe the three
Mm-hmm.
of us get quite a bit out of supporting and helping other people to define their way of health, right? And in learning the boundary of
Mm-hmm.
being self-responsible and being here first and foremost 100% before you can give out to the world. It's a process of learning, and sometimes we we don't often know it ourselves, and it takes others to help us kind of get back on the track, so to speak, on that arena. Thank you for sharing
Mm-hmm.
that. That's
Mm-hmm.
Thank
I
you
would say
both.
is pretty darn accurate of this man over
Yeah.
here. And so let's go to what I started with you, Kristen,
Mm-hmm.
which is to go to the healthiest level one, which is at their best. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
we're taking the focus on the helper, the personality type number two. At your best, you become deeply unselfish, humble, altruistic. You're giving unconditional love to self and others. You feel it is a privilege to be in the lives of others. So, Ed, you want to chime in here just a little bit, and if you have anything to say about what Kristen and I have been saying about you?
Sure. Another annual review, literally. No, but I mean,
Yeah.
I really, I appreciate the thought and the feedback, and you guys are more than just colleagues, so to me, and I value your opinion, and it it it's helpful for me to hear and to know where I am in my path. And it also is helpful to not to be called out, but just to be made aware of the other side. We've been talking about the shadow side of things, and just reviewing the Enneagram. It just was kind of a slap in the face for me reading the
Mm.
things to work on. And it's things I've always known. Yes, I definitely I value what I do, and I put all my effort and focus into the person in front of me that I'm helping and working on. But it's true, on the other side, on the flip side, I definitely have a tendency to overextend. And I know as I read on the Enneagram number two, the helper, I just all I could do was just shake my head and
Mm.
think, man, just the fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough. And I know that has been part of our mantras. We are enough, we are
Right.
abundant, but it does take work for me, to be honest, to actually really remind myself that. And just reading this report on the helper, um, and the other two, the peacemaker and the loyalist, just thinking, oh my gosh, these are things I've struggled with all my life. Just am I enough? And the fear of not being enough, the fear of not living up to my potential, of being judged. And it definitely has compromised my relationships. And you guys have been witness to that. Like I've definitely, you know, been married
Mm,
to my work more
mm,
than my relationships. And I continue to learn, and the universe will always intervene, correct an imbalance, and again, I'm grateful for you both for always holding space, and to also to acknowledge my achievements, even though I don't,
mm,
but to just also with loving kindness also say, hey, take some time. And I don't always hear it. I like understand it, and something in me still struggles with that. And
Mm,
I'm better at it now at this stage in my life. I could always be better, but I'm definitely better.
mm.
But thank you again for taking the time.
Are you aware of sort of when that story was planted in you?
Gosh, with all the readings and all the study we've done with Gestalt and trauma-based work, and the idea of a stable base of support and culture. And gosh, I probably really early on, to be honest. And
Yeah.
it wasn't something that was physically told to me that, oh, you're not enough. Although that is definitely traumatizing. And we've heard those examples, but it was more the not being told that you're enough. I was constantly seeking acknowledgement or approval. Am I doing this right? And I just had to figure it out. And I don't know if it's just personally my family or my culture. They don't, my Chinese upbringing, they don't say, hey, good job. Not to say that all Chinese do that or don't do that. My family, they just did not say, hey, you're doing a great job. It was just, they didn't say anything. They would say if you messed up, but they wouldn't
mm,
say, hey, great job, you know? So it was confusing. It could be confusing. And then and talking to other folks that had experienced it, and it's enlightening to see and to be aware at this stage, like how that ripple effect can continue on into adulthood, and definitely in my career. And so it was more that lack of acknowledgement. Yeah. and and then I just needed to seek it, and I continued to seek it both professionally and definitely personally too, and just had to stumble along the way. And then until now at 53, it's like, okay, I am enough. But it still takes work for me to actually say that out loud.
Well, you said something at the very beginning, which was that it wasn't so much the physical, or it's just that you weren't acknowledged just for what was potentially profitable for you to grow. And there's a Dr. Winnicott, I think it was actually, it's in this book, and I just found the page because I thought it was so. When you said, I was like, my goodness, that's something I learned through reading this piece. So, we always think about trauma as the things that are done to us, or the neglect or abandonment, right, and rejection outright. And it's actually that our children are not seen,
mm,
and we don't acknowledge the seen part before they even know that it's there in a way. And he puts, I'm just going to read this for a second because it's so important. And I know that in patient care, this is an element of, I believe, patients' incapacity at times to follow up through care. It has a lot to do with this necessary conversation we're having on, we are enough, and trying to get around that big barrel of not being enough, and then self-sabotaging our capacity to live optimally or to come out from under a physical injury. And there's a lot of hopelessness around that. And so part of our mm, the important thing about being a wise practitioner, someone who's experienced but also has the sense, is to understand these elements deeply. And because if we don't, then we don't see the patterns in people. And that's what we really are. We're just pattern readers, really. And we do it so much in movement dysfunction. Well, we're now doing it in terms of the psychology of patients' movements in their head, right? So he says, oh boy, children, especially highly sensitive children, and I would categorize, Ed as highly sensitive. If we use that terminology, though I want to say that my disclaimer is that we're all highly sensitive. We've just been covered over so much, so many layers on us. That's why we cry a lot when we start to unpeel, because you're becoming more sensitive to what's really you.
Mm.
So children, especially highly sensitive children, can be wounded in multiple ways by bad things happening, yes, but also by good things not happening, right? Such as their emotional needs for attunement not being met. That's the example you're offering, Ed. Or the experience of not being seen and accepted, even by loving parents, which is what you're talking to. Uh, Trauma of this kind does not require overt distresses or misfortune of the sort mentioned, but can also lead to the pain of disconnection from self, occurring as a result of core needs not being satisfied. The British pediatrician D.W. Winnicott referred to as, quote unquote, nothing happening when something might probably have happened. A subject that they'll return to. So the trauma of everyday life can make us feel a little bit like a motherless child, Gabor says. Uh, I didn't imagine we're going to talk about that. Crazy where we go. And I think that going deep here is a very clear sign of the courage and vulnerability to do it. So let's take a couple
Like it.
words. Kristen, do you have
Yeah.
him up?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go ahead and throw a word or two out to Ed and see how he responds to it?
Well intentioned. I think I said generous before, right?
If I step back, yes, I feel that's how I live my life and how I view my relationships. And then in this stage of life and after all the inner work, I also I'm starting to see the shadow side of that as well. And how sometimes too much generosity and too much well intention can be can be draining for me and maybe even overwhelming and invasive for someone else who doesn't want it. And then that, as I read the report of how, again, that fear of rejection and then me wanting to fix it even more. um, and this is more in my, it definitely has happened in relationships with patients where I keep trying to go down the list of, man, did I get everything? I cannot help
Mm.
this person. But I've also done that in personal relationships where I just am in their face and trying to fix it and trying to fix it. And sometimes people just need space,
Mm.
or I just need to be okay with I can't fix it. And that
Mm.
was it can still be a really tough one to swallow. I'm like, shoot, I cannot fix this problem. And being okay to let it go, or it's
Mhm.
let go for me. Anyways,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, for that. Yeah.
Yeah, let me comment on what you just said. Uh, you said like you did this being in people's face. We're here to take care of ourselves. If we can focus on our self-responsibility here and be aware of those aspects in ourselves, then what I think comes out of that conversation that you're having in your head, Ed, the healthy direction is let me inquire, let me check in. Do you need some help? Would you like my opinion? So it goes back to our previous conversations when we're setting up our first visit with our patients is what can I do for you? Because if I say that I believe I can fix you, then what it says to the patient unconsciously is that it becomes a passive exchange in some respect, and then they lose agency. And so the
Mhm.
focus is I need to be agent of my own self first and foremost 100%. And that way I can emulate through action and word to transmit that to the other person. But it's by doing and supporting or standing shoulder to shoulder with the person, but not necessarily leading them in the very beginning. And I think that's the opportunity we have when we look at these as, you're the helper and loyalist, uber loyalist and uber helper.
Yeah.
And that's why we love you so much. That's why we call you the panda, you know, because
Mhm.
how can you not love the panda? It's just, they're rolling around eating their bamboo sprigs and happy.
Rolling
Uh,
around, playing, playful.
are they even bears?
And I looked at it, I was like, oh, I have that inside too.
So the suppression of
I don't,
anger.
Yes.
I don't, I'm
And
trying to think if I've seen
I hide it.
anger.
he
Yeah,
hides
Yeah.
it really well.
I
you
hide
really
it.
do.
And it comes as we've studied trauma-based work, right? It comes out in physical ways,
Mm.
right? As we've seen in our patients and clients.
Mm.
Like I just definitely will be just more tense and lose sleep and oh, my digestive health is out the door.
Well, the other thing we talked about with Kristen, because we talked about the suppression of anger in her space, as well as in mine too, and we all also agreed on one point of personality. Interestingly, was passive aggressiveness. I think that's an important one to kind of look at because the passiveness is pushing down and keeping down the things that you don't like, and you just build up over time, and then it just gets to a boiling point and you act out something to release the valve. And I really think it's repression of anger a lot of the times too. So in making it more level to our consciousness, then we don't need to be passive aggressive anymore because that's not who we are. That was given to us, through conditions and conditioning and programming. If we know that very well, then part of the way that we get around, that we heal the passive aggressiveness and suppression of anger is we actually speak and we ask for our needs to be met. But the challenge that we have, which creates that beautiful opportunity in knowing these things about ourselves, is it creates the opportunity to change and to change your life, which means which might change their environmental situation too at hand, which means job, which means relationships, which means going this way versus that way, which means maybe moving, all these elements, which has
Mm.
happened in my career with my patients is, when they realize that they can no longer survive and be this person anymore, they change. And I think what's happening even as we're speaking right this minute is Ed, Kristen, and Terry are in the moment of actually changing their DNA as we're having this conversation because we're being made more aware of these predilections and personality types that we have and the things that we love about ourselves and love about each other and the things that we really just want to put aside. Notions that we all carry the type 2 in us. Ed just happens to be at the top of that, right? On top of being a loyalist. I forget the other one. What was the other one, Ed?
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker. Oh my
That's
gosh.
Just like with just like with
Oh,
just like with
the
Kristen.
holy trifecta.
yeah, you know,
So,
right? Yeah,
I know when I saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I pondered,
Wait,
and thanks for
that was
sharing
your.
that, Terry.
Let's see.
Yeah, that was my number two, was
Okay.
Peacemaker. Exploring, Kristen, your Peacemaker, how it was to you, it definitely was resonating with me as well, a lot of it.
Mhm.
And so, and then just Terry and thank you for sharing that, just looking about the idea of passive aggressiveness. And I know that is a feature with the helper. I think as with the Peacemaker too, but is that something innate and we can change it, or is that something, like you said, been conditioned and learned? I know my mother, who passed away several years ago, she tended to be passive aggressive, and I don't know if I was just learning that, seeing that.
mm,
My
mhm,
father was more aggressive, my mother was more passive aggressive, and just to see
mhm.
that and maybe just subconsciously fall in line with that. And then my brother and I have talked about, my mom died of stage 4 stomach cancer, and just how she there's no cancer in our family history, so just for her to hold all that into the stomach, and
That's
I
right.
and I we wonder about that, like, wow. And just in cases we've come across, that you can come up with your own theories, like, wow, was that an actual physiological thing? Was that an energetic, emotional thing that brought
Yes.
upon this pathological pathway? Yeah. And so
Yeah.
just to know my mom and what she went through and how she held everything in and how it manifested, her
Right.
actually kind of warning my brother and I, hey, you guys just really tend to yourself. And she probably meant not just physically, but even though she was saying physically, but it's really just
Yes.
also, like you guys were saying, emotional and spiritual and energetic.
Ed,
Yeah.
Ed, do you think that your mother suppressed her anger and tried to
Yes,
make
for
a
sure.
yeah?
Yes.
So that's kind of the personality type for chronic illness and autoimmune disorders, and cancer is technically an autoimmune disorder and a chronic condition. So that
Yeah.
happens over many, many, many years.
No one wants
And
their parent to sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
mm, I was going to say that the saying that we're passive aggressive and saying that we do suppress our anger, actually saying it and giving it voice, releases it. The biggest fear, what I'm observing in the three of us as we're talking, have been talking, is that we have this level of comfort to be able to express these aspects that people would normally not want to talk about at all. It's all supposed to be faced out in the world as good. You're joyous, you're generous, you're authentic, you're supportive, you're a good friend, you're a good lover, you're a good husband, good wife, good partner. But you know what? That's just one half of the coin. And sometimes that tarnishing happens because it bleeds over, but we never talk about these things because it's a skill to be able to say, look, I have anger issues. I have in the past, I've had anger issues, and I have been very passive aggressive in my life because I didn't have control over this aspect of myself. I didn't see what was going on behind the scenes. And I was only reflecting unconsciously to try to control my world to make things stable here, but it was highly dysfunctional and I was very dysregulated. And so the way I regulated myself
Mhm.
was through addictive things that I would do. And for me, it was exercise, cycling and things like that mostly. Exercise addiction. And for Ed, it's when you say it, when you talk about this, but you also link it to historical elements in your life and you look at, oh, your parents, it strikes as somebody who is actually wanting to understand much, much greater
Mm.
themselves today and moving forward. and putting the resonance back into the space of family dynamic so that we're not continuing to perpetuate the generational disharmony.
And thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's what I was gonna say was, as I even looked at the thread with the three Enneagram types, the helper, the peacemaker, and the loyalist, and just it's great because the report gives you some tips,
Yeah.
some suggestions on how you can transform. Yeah. And I see a thread of just, being able to communicate and speak and speak your mind. And no one wants their no one wants their parents to divorce. And I remember my brother and my parents would fight a lot growing up, and just I know it affected us in some way, outwardly or inwardly. But we wanted them to have peace, and and then essentially they were separate because dad moved back to Taiwan, even though they were technically married. But I felt, just and reflecting on this as I spoke with my brother, just watching my mom never really voiced her wants and needs. She did say a little, every so often she would throw something out like, "Oh, I wanted to go to school and continue this and learn this, and I didn't." And recently, Matt and I watched Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club on the movie, and there's a scene, and it follows the generations of the Chinese women, their daughters and their mothers. And one scene that still gets the waterworks going is just the mother tells her daughter, "Know your worth," and
Oh, yeah.
she she had trouble voicing her needs and knowing her worth. And maybe I cry every time because I struggle with that too. And knew that my mother struggled with that too. And know your worth, not just professionally, but also personally, for sure. And it's interesting knowing, and you guys have been witness too, of my previous relationships and the struggles and traumas at the end. And when Matt and I met and I shared the same stories of what I went through, and he just said, "Wow, you put up with a lot of bullshit in life, and don't do that with me."
Mm.
And the fact that he said that to me, he's like, "Don't talk to me, communicate with me."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it was something I just never really heard a partner say to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Matt's a special one.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I can attest to that.
yeah,
And he's the best mirror for you.
yeah,
And that's a deep sense of love and connection when we have partners like that for us that make us want to flee or fight
yes,
or
yes,
freeze.
Mhm.
We started with Kristen and how that kind of just opened up, and there's even more in there, right? We could spend, more time, just looking into the beauty of Kristen and all the things that she is, and recognizing the things that she no longer wants to be. It's in the same vein as Ed
Mhm.
with you. All the things that we see as beauty in you, and to always hold that first and foremost, and know that these other things are not just, they kind of ruled our life, but they don't need to rule our life anymore. And if we can focus our energies in the higher vibration, which is love, compassion, gratitude, peace, joy, these things, and give that a little bit of those dewdrops into that space that we struggle with, then it just mollifies it so much quicker the more that we focus on the repetitions of doing that. And I believe that's why when we talk together, it's we're talking in a professional, personal, or interpersonal standpoint, and we're focusing on
Mhm.
patient care and how we show up, but it's really how we show up for ourselves first and
Life.
foremost. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And I think if you were the model, you're just being it. This is the whole notions about Tao is, once it's named, it no longer exists. And that's what I take from that in my study is that once you yourself fully, you don't exist anymore. See, that self doesn't exist. and you just live your life very intentionally with everything that you do. Every step you take, it's with intention. And any misstep you make, you take care of it and you keep moving forward though. And so people look at you thinking, dang, that Kristen is like, she's pretty powerful. She's like unshakable, and she's very firm. She's very boundaried, she's beautifully compassionate, and she's very assured of herself. And she's
Mhm.
same with Ed. Ed goes, well, I know who I am now, and I don't need to say that. I'm going to express it in the way that I move in my world today, where I go with who I decide to be with. And that's a huge part of getting out of the conditions of the ways that we were raised, and we look at trauma as children, and this whole sense about being worthy. And this is where it really begins. I mean, it really begins the sense of losing our genuineness
Hmm.
and to attach to safety. It's all about attachment and how that relates to us as we're growing. And that's how our ego shell is built. It's there to protect us. But sometimes it gets so hard that we don't even see what's happening.
I
Okay.
feel that transition point, that inflection point of, yeah, transition
Nice.
and change,
Yeah. Right. That's nice.
awareness, consciousness.
You know, it,
Mm.
if we're all there, there isn't anything you can't do. There isn't anything that you cannot do. And I mean, my experience of playing with the spirit molecule, or, God's molecule, so to speak, DMT, and the things that are in the psychedelics, is that it allows one, from my experience, to take away the default mode network, which is where they say the ego is placed, that controls everything in our world, the way that we look at the world, and it just puts it on hold during that time. And that's when one experiences this notion of unconditional love. There isn't anything else. And I think when we die as human beings, we go into unconditional love in the hereafter. And so there isn't anything
Mm.
about the world that we suffer in and the reasons why we have to take these personality tests to figure out what path we've been on and what we want to be going toward right now, that once you get to the end, you realize, you know. So I'd much rather have that experience now while I'm living, to be fully realized, self-actualized, and living a life that's completely free of all of the entanglements that are conditions of other people's stories about us and about the world around us. So we're just recrafting and recreating our own narrative for ourselves, but to do it with such strong integrity and presence and temperance to the world that allows us not to fear the world anymore. Our sense of unworthiness comes from a place of fear. And then we rule our life on fear. And fear is a sympathetic state, right?
Mhm.
And love is completely parasympathetic. Our sexual organs are based in parasympathetic tone, not sympathetic tone. See, you think
Yeah.
it'd be the other way around, but it's not. And so taking that notion that whoever created this divineness of us, pretty impressive.
Thank you for that, Terry.
Thank
Mm.
you, Terry.
So how, Ed, for you in interpreting and looking at your personality types and the descriptions,
Mm.
how do you relate it to patient care moving forward for yourself?
Mm.
Uh, but I feel in terms of going forward, and as my role in helping people changes and transforms, it's definitely knowing I can't help everyone. I'm just there to be a guide. I'm just there to sometimes step back and just sometimes do nothing, not nothing, but to hold space and to maybe lend an ear, which I've always done, but to also know, well, also know my boundary, that there's only so much I can do and only so much I could take in.
So if you were sitting
Like,
with the patient on your first day with them, what would one thing that you actually do in their presence to be able to acknowledge that?
Is to really just listen and as you had asked and brought up, how can I help you? Or more like what is important to you? What would you like to get out of this? What are you looking for? Instead of what, how can I help you? Which is as a new grad, what can I do? And I need to go everything I've learned in school
that's
and yeah. And wait.
that's a
I haven't done number 7 in my checklist, you know. But now it's what's happening? What's going on? What's important
mm,
to you? It doesn't matter what I
I
learned,
really,
what
yeah.
do you know what I'm saying? What's important to me? What's important? I had to learn that. Now it's what's important to you. And before I would take offense, like, well, can you do this way? Or even with acupuncture, what about this point? And I used to be like in my bubble, I know what's going on. But now I surrender and I just say, you know
Mm.
what? No, you know your body, you know what's up. I'm just here as a guide. I'm just here to share what I see, but you know what's going on. If you don't, maybe I'll say, hey, what about this? More like a suggestion, not like you got to do this. That's been tough. I know some people maybe thrive better with direction and structure,
Mhm.
but sometimes you just have to say you gotta, that's all of Gestalt, right? Helping them with self-inquiry. And as we have we've had our challenges with Kaiser and and the statistic, oh, you need to discharge your patient in 2.5 to 1.5 visits. The idea of self-empowerment, and that is still important to me, but it's also, well, how can I also help you fostering your independence?
Mhm. I really like how you said that. Like, what's important to you? Because I think sometimes, like, how can I help you? Is again, it's like I'm doing the helping. You know, how can I help
Yes,
you? Or it's like,
Right,
what is
exactly.
right,
important to you and getting that? Yeah.
right, right. Just making it patient client centric, truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it's all about giving them complete agency and sovereignty over themselves. It's teaching them because majority of people don't have it. Specifically in patient care, they don't. Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is just what I've come up and just with our work and our conversations, just to say, well, hey, what's important to you?
Mm.
And let's see if I can contribute or
You know, it's just beginner's mind all over again. If
totally
you remember the first time you did a subjective evaluation in your field work, can you remember how that felt to you?
Mm,
the hot
I
seat.
was
okay.
totally. The Gestalt
Mm,
nature of practice is really what that is. It's beautiful. And it does take
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And
mm,
thankfully, we've had tens of thousands of patient encounters to be able to refine and hone this aspect. And we're continually doing it, you know. That's why we can have these conversations.
Um, just to summarize here, I like this that twos grow by recognizing that caring for themselves and caring for others is not an either or proposition.
Mm,
They can care for others
Right on.
effectively only when they are also caring for themselves and recognizing their own needs.
amen. Truth, truth.
That summarizes it, I think.
I like that. Me too. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Wow, Kristen, you could have said at the beginning and then we could just
Right?
not have to do all this.
Done.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that was awesome.
Exactly. All right.
Thanks, Ed, for sitting on the love seat and
Thank you
allowing
Mhm.
both.
ourselves to
Thank you both.
investigate with you. And
Yeah.
guess we'll call it a day.
Yeah. Bring us
Yeah.
into the new year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you both. I love you both.
Love you
And
too. Love you both
I,
as well.
Mhm.
Can't really express it. I just feel it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
all right, guys.
Okay.
Thank you for another
Sounds
wonderful
good.
session. I don't have
Yes.
to go to my therapist anymore. I'll just have you guys
Yeah.
talk.
Agreed. I'm going to cancel my appointment this week.
All right, guys. We'll talk
Love you
soon.
Okay.
both. Love you both. Happy New
Okay.
All
Year.
right. Blessings.
Happy New Year.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah.
Live long and prosper.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Mhm.
Bye.